Without even asking, you've all agreed. Thank you all very much. Councillor Morrissey, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you, Chair, members and officers. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm speaking today both as a lifelong resident and a councillor for Motspur Park and Old Malden East. And I'd like to briefly raise two issues affecting our residents. And while they concern very different projects, they share a common theme. And that theme is that residents feel overlooked in decisions that affect their communities. First, it's the Muga programme. Let me be clear, many residents that I speak to support investment in sport and better facilities for young people in our parks. And what I and many do not support is a process that leaves communities feeling excluded from decisions affecting some of the most important public spaces to their daily lives. Throughout this process, residents, friends groups and local councillors have not been meaningfully consulted. In the case of Manor Park, this is particularly evident in concerns around location, accessibility and inclusivity. I'm also concerned about the consultation evidence being relied on. As mentioned by our resident, the survey of 304 respondents contains no evidence of engagement with residents from Old Malden or Motspur Park, despite it being most impacted. Many of the people who care most deeply about these parks simply did not know this process was taking place. And my request today is very simple. Myself and some councillors across the Maldens have asked for planning process to be paused until residents have been properly heard. However, if the committee is minded to approve the contract today, as they are separate processes as implied, please provide clear assurances that residents' voices will genuinely be heard and capable of influencing outcomes before any further steps are taken. Specifically, I ask for engagement events at the affected parks, 1, a properly promoted local consultation process, 2, and a presentation of the proposals to the New and Old Malden Neighbourhood Committee in September 3. The long-term success of these facilities and this process will depend on whether communities feel ownership of them. Secondly, as we briefly talked about planning, about the local plan, I'd briefly like to raise the Motspur Park gas holders development. As many of us know, as we discuss the local plan, this proposal is no longer in our hands.
It's actually, Councillor Morrissey, I'm really sorry, it's not the item that we're discussing.
Oh, okay, sure. Well,
but thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And for your comments.
Cheers.
Yeah, nice try. Newbies, hey, gotta love them. I now move from the chair to recommend at the front of the report on page B1, after the motion is moved in accordance with procedural rules, I cannot permit any further contribution. Andrew, Councillor Waldridge, would you second it, please?
Yes, I second it, Chair.
Would members of the committee who wish to speak, please raise your hands. Okay. Councillor Kim, should we start with you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support the principle of improving sport and recreation facility for young people and the wider community. A well-designed and well-managed play zone or MUGA can bring a real benefit to local residents. However, even a good project can become problematic if the process is not transparent, if the residents are not properly consulted, or the location and management arrangement are not carefully considered. I do not want this to become a young people versus resident or sports versus biodiversity. With a proper consultation and management, this project could work. Without that, it risks creating avoidable harm and damaging public confidence. So I would like to ask for clarification on 2 points. First, why does the contract award appear to have a prepared, identified contractor already? Second, can officer clarify why Fulham Football Foundation carried out the stakeholder engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor? Could I have a response, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kim. I think the two questions there are, why have we already identified a contractor? Hopefully that's clear in the report. The Football Foundation, this is a national scheme. They use a framework where they've had competitive tenders and appointed a contractor for the schemes in other areas as well. So as the requirement of the funding, we need to use their appointed contractor. Sorry, could you repeat the second question?
Why the Fulham Football Foundation carried out the stakeholder engagement.
Yeah, well, that was a joint effort, I think, through our Let's Talk platform. We also, officers attended a number of event days, and we had sites, posters, etc. There is some detail on the council's Let's Talk website with the engagement that was carried out and a summary of the responses.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Folder-Hughes?
Hello. Really just a quick one. I note that Kingston Road is one of the proposed sites, and that's in my ward. We do have a plan as part of the regeneration to have and the outline plan to have a multi-use games area in phase 3. So I was just wondering what conversations have been had with the regeneration team to ensure that we're not duplicating two very similar facilities in close proximity. I know that actually, we're talking like a long time frame with the regeneration, but it'd be good to know if we can make them slightly distinct to ensure we don't have duplication.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I might take that one. As Cambridge Road Estate regeneration sits under me and not Deb. I mean, I think the key, yes, to your question, yes, of course, conversations have been going on and we have looked at the siting of it. I do think the main point I would make is that they're meeting very, very different needs. So the multi-use games area on the estate is, generally speaking, in respect of play for smaller children, not the level of organisation that I think is being anticipated within the facilities you're talking about tonight in terms of the contract award. So, yeah, and we will have other, the truth of it is across the borough, we'll have other occasions where there are similar facilities nearby, but meeting different types of need for different types of use.
Okay, no further questions? No. Councillor?
Thank you. There's been quite a bit of talk today from the earlier comments, the questions and the initial introduction about people having consultation as part of the planning application. Now, planning is planning. That's not proper consultation. You have to use planning reasons to object. What we're talking about is proper consultation before we get to this stage where we're sitting here tonight. Now, I don't know exactly what's gone on, but I've had a hell of a lot of emails and a hell of a lot of in-depth comments that saying the consultation has been really bad. And even the friends of the park, who are like gold dust, quite frankly, to have groups like that, even they are fed up and don't think they've been properly consulted. So, to cut to the quick, on the assumption that there has been poor consultation, is there any way that we can just put our hands up and apologise, but what to do next? We obviously don't want to lose funding. The extra funding we're getting is great, but there's still a lot of money from the council taxpayer that goes with it. So is there any way of effectively halting this, consulting properly, not talking about the planning application, and address the issues that have been brought to us today, so that everybody is as happy as they can be, even if they're a bit miffed as what gone on early doors. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Dibbs, would you like to answer that?
I can answer part of it. I think there's some sort of wider policy decisions perhaps there, and I'd conscious of straying into kind of planning discussions as well, so perhaps somebody tell me if I do that. I appreciate the lady from Manor Park is here, and of course we really welcome the input of the Friends Group. I think we've delivered many projects in that area successfully together with the team, so I hope that's recognised. We have had 2 meetings and a further site meeting with Friends of Manor Park ahead of the planning application going through, but I do think we need to be a little bit clear around kind of some of the options for changes of locations or fundamental design of the scheme, given that we are getting 75% of the funding from the Football Foundation. Those sites have been identified through the Active Kingston strategy, as we said in some response to the earlier public questions, and a lot of work's gone into assessing that we believe those are the right sites to put forward. We can certainly provide additional information and signpost people to the planning process. We plan to do further engagement around actually how we'd sort of schedule and which specific activities we would support in each of the play zone sites, but that is a little chicken and egg until we know the exact locations confirmed and the design and opening hours, etc., through the planning process before we can start to talk to other funders around potentially other activities that we could provide for the wider community. Thank you.
So just quickly, so does, I don't want to get too picky, but so does that mean that we can't, that the locations and the actual whole point of having it is set in stone, and there's no way we can have a consultation and still get this money? There's no way out. Is that what we're saying?
I would suggest that any change to the proposal would have to be considered as a new application for funding to the Football Foundation, other than any comments and changes that come about through the planning process.
Okay, Councillor Massini.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank everyone who has spoken on this paper, and I actually fully support most of the feedback that I've heard. I was under the impression, and hopefully that's correct, that tonight we were only going to vote as councillor and members on the selection of a unique provider as recommended or as chosen and decided by the Football Association. It was my understanding that we will continue afterwards, if this goes ahead, to look at each individual of the 4 proposed Muga locations and design on their own merit, individually and separately. And it is also my understanding, and I might be wrong, I will ask 3 questions afterwards, that the funding will be allocated pro rata, let's call it, or spread between those 4 sites, if those 4 sites were to go ahead. I am now slightly confused with the answer we have received tonight, and I would like some clarifications on a number of points. Will the application be 4 different sites that can be decided, adjusted, or looked at independently? And if so, if one of the 4 sites were to be refused or considered inappropriate or not fit for purpose from a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down decision, will that potentially compromise the rest of the funding for the overall scheme? That is my first question. My second question is quite important because things move quickly and price can go up and down. I understand 75% of the cost for the current total amount value will be covered by the football associations and organization. If the cost were to escalate or be higher, is my understanding correct that Kingston Council will have to top up the remaining balance, and it is no longer 75%, but just a fixed amount, which was the original 3/4 of the estimated cost per Muga? So therefore, it's important they will not put more than they had agreed to, even if the cost were to be higher than their 75% share. And my third question is regarding the flexibility, some of it has been answered by Officer tonight, but frankly, around this table, are we able to be flexible and say that some location can be moved 30 meters, even if that means that we need to extend some cables and light, based on, let's assume, an overwhelming demand from local residents, ground user, and just the neighborhood? Is this possible? So I'd like to have a very clear answer to those 3 questions. Thank you.
Go ahead and answer that one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Massimi. Sorry if I caused some confusion with my earlier answer. Going to the contract award, yes, you're right. That is the the decision that we're being asked to make today. The contract award is entirely dependent on planning permission or any other permissions that we give. We're not saying we're going to go and award the contract tomorrow. But there are 4 sites, and if any of those go ahead, we want to make sure that we are prepared and ready to enter into those agreements so as not to cause any delay. The funding was allocated in this financial year, so I think there's probably some flexibility working with the Football Foundation around that, but we do need to be mindful of it as well. Yes, if only 1 or 2 or 3 sites go ahead, then we'll be raising separate contracts and purchase orders for each of those, so saying no to one doesn't jeopardise the whole project. My understanding, I might need to just double check after the meeting, but my understanding is that the Football Foundation will give 75% of the project costs. I think there could be a wider debate, if there were delays that were seen as not with outside our control, for example, and then that might be conversation, but as a basis, it's 75%. And I think, the last question was to your colleagues as well. With that specific reference to 30 metres, I think we were discussing about Manor Park. I think some of the justifications for choosing the location as proposed have been made with sort of mitigations given to some of the concerns that have been raised about that specific location without going too much into the planning detail. My advice is that we would go through that process and see what came out of the other end. It could be adjusted if we felt that the site wasn't viable because it's not a fully new site. But I think all those are, for further discussion. I can't give any guarantees on that today.
Councillor Giles?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, well, I know some members around this committee this evening have been to Green Lane Recreation Ground, which sits in the ward I represent, bordering Berrylands ward. But I don't know how many have been recently since the multi-use games area was installed there. Indeed, I know you were at the opening, Councillor Baldridge. It's a very well-used piece of kit, if you like, even in its infancy. Young kids, older teens, even adults go and use it. It's free to use, and it was funded by RBK. The contract award for the Mooga and other playground improvements came to some £150,000. This is an open access games area that had full support from the community. In fact, we didn't have a single person opposing it because we did it with them. We co-designed it with them over a period of over a year, and we made sure it was sensitive to the community's needs. And so with that in mind, I feel a little uneasy about the amount that is being charged for these 4 multi-use games areas, which I presume are the same size as the Mooga in Green Lane Recreation Ground. If we can do it for £150,000, because that was the sum of the contract that was awarded under tender, quite why it is costing £1.3 million for these 4 play zones is of great concern to me, especially when we're putting in over £300,000 of that. My other concern with this is around the access. As I've said, the Green Lane Mooga is open access. Anyone can use it anytime, day or night. These, as a condition of the grant funding, have to have a lockable key entry, a 4-digit entry pad, and you have to book to use these sites. These aren't open access for anybody to use. And so I thought I'd do a bit of digging, because some of these play zones have already been installed. Our nearest one is in Southall, in the London Borough of Ealing. They charge a staggering £25 per hour if you, as a member of the public, want to use one of these moogers. It reads, "General public, fancy having a kickabout or other multi-sports with your friends? Book a slot, just £25 per hour. Brackets, the hirer should be over 18 years old," which is sound advice. And so, whilst I fully support introducing these games areas in principle across the borough, I'm not convinced that these play zones represent good value for us in terms of the build, but also for our residents, especially those from low socioeconomic backgrounds, who would not be able to afford £25 an hour to play in a mooger. I know me and my friends certainly wouldn't have been able to if you go back some 15 years or so. And so, given that tonight we're being asked to award a contract for the supply and installation of these facilities, obviously subject to planning, I just feel this is really rather rushed. Planning is great, but as members here will know, we can't say at a planning committee, we're going to approve this subject to it being moved 30 metres down the way. That requires a new planning application to go in. We can only say yes or no to what's in front of us. And the simple fact is, I'm not pointing blame at any one person here. I think we're all in the same boat. Somebody's jumped the gun. Someone has submitted these 4 planning applications as final finished products against the will, certainly of the Friends of Beverley Park, which is the park nearest to where I live, but also clearly the Friends of Manor Park who are here this evening. So given that the Football Foundation says on its website that community engagement is at the heart of this programme, I'm quoting verbatim, Chair, and I again quote, "Facilities will be designed in partnership with communities to ensure that the final design and surface works for football and other sports are identified for that area. Activation and management of the space is as important as the facility itself." Now, if the Football Foundation really means those words, then what I would hope, if anyone from them is watching this evening or later watches the webcast, is that they might understand that people here, including ward members, have got very valid concerns. We're not saying we don't want this, but we're saying that it's jumped ahead too far, and actually, sometimes we just need to take 1 or 2 steps back. And so what I'd like to propose, Chair, through you, is an amendment to this, that this item be deferred to come back to the next ordinary place committee meeting, to the effect that in that interregnum, which of course helpfully will be over the summer holidays, we can have those meaningful conversations. If plans need to be amended, if planning applications need to be amended, even if it's just to move it 30 metres, that gives us time to do it. And we're fortunate, as Ms Dibb has said, that we're early enough in the financial year that there is some flexibility. And so I'd like to propose that we defer this to September with a view to community engagement being undertaken over the summer at each of the 4 locations. And I'd welcome a seconder, Chair. Thank you.
Could I ask officers if they want to comment on that note? I need a seconder first. Can I have a seconder for that?
Well, I'll second, but I'd like to hear what the officers have got to say. Thank you.
Okay.
Now,
No.
so we now have the amendments on the table with Councillor George. Second.
Anyone have any comments on the amendment?
I've got Councillor Mendes there, but...
Okay,
do
and
you
Councillor
want-
Hayes?
Do you also wish to let officers respond to the amendment?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
Can you respond?
yeah.
Thank you.
Play mic battle. Yeah, sorry. Just on the amendment or the wider comments, or take the amendment first.
Take the amendment first. I had meant the wider comments, but let's
Oh,
do the amendment
okay.
first.
On the deferral.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, my only advice can be, as we kind of stated earlier, there's nothing binding around making the decision that we will appoint the contractor once the planning permissions are determined. I think it does risk the overall timetable and implementation of the projects if we decide they want to go ahead in terms of the Football Foundation funding. So that is my only point on the deferral.
Bear with Matthew Essex going to say something.
Sorry, just to build on my colleague's point, I think the fundamental issue here is not how much time we've got in the year, but how quickly we then have to spend the grant. So the grant, as I understand it, is available until the end of the financial year. So to follow through that deferral, come back with an agreement of 4 sites in September, which then presumably then required to go through the planning process and be procured and then delivered. To be very clear, I don't personally see that as doable within the time available. We are not going to be able to secure planning consent, procure a contractor and deliver those works within the timetable we've got for the grant. We would end up losing it.
Councillor Giles, would you like to respond to that? And then Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points, if I may. I mean, the first is, of course, that as a condition of the grant, we have to use McArdle Sport Tech Limited. And so, you know, it's not like we are having to go out and run a competitive tender. And actually, the report was quite helpful in explaining that we can directly award the contract via the existing framework, as is required under the rules and regulations. My other point being, we are literally being asked this evening to award the contract to McArdle Sport Tech Limited. But the officer recommendation, if I may, is to award the contract for the supply and installation. And so what I'm saying is that, you know, a planning consultation is not sufficient. You know, residents may want it moved 30 metres down the way, but actually if there's nothing in planning regulations and nothing in our plan that says it has to be moved 30 metres, we are powerless to give it a refusal at planning stage. And what we actually need is a more holistic consultation that involves residents, that involves our friends of groups. I just think we're moving way too fast on this. And if the Football Foundation are true to their word, that community engagement is at the heart of this programme, I have every confidence, if they mean what they say, that they will work with us to make sure we are able to put the community at the front and centre, as they claim they want to do, because it hasn't happened so far, which is why, staggeringly, people have come this evening to voice their opposition. You know, this should be something that's unanimously welcome, but the fact that at 2 of these 4 sites, we've got such strong opposition, £25 an hour, you know, I understand why. So, you know, we've only got one shot at this. We need to get it right.
I've logged off again.
It's okay, not off.
I'm not off. Yes, would you like to respond? And then we'll come over to members' comments.
Yeah, I mean, again, on the sort of the contract process, no, we're not going out to tender, etc. But there's still, you know, legal paperwork, joining the framework, etc., to be done. Like I say, the contract decision tonight doesn't commit us to anything. But just to point on the charges, I mean, perhaps if we're outside of this meeting, we can send some more details, but my colleague Dave was just saying he's familiar with that site in Southall. It's on a sort of youth centre. It's managed in an entirely different way. The setting of charges is completely a local decision. I think you said as well about, you know, activation and management being very important. And I think that's the point that we can have further conversation and engagement around exactly what's going to be at each site and the charges. The planning applications will state that the only charges will be for commercial use. In terms of the gated access, the reason for that is so that space can be protected for particular groups and access can be booked, or, you know, if we want to put on a specific group or facility, or, you know, or supported activity, then we can do that. And there will also be some times when the gate isn't blocked just for free access. But all of those things are details that we can have further conversations on. But it is not intended as a commercial facility with high charges, and that is entirely within the council's gift to set those charges itself.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to separate things out. I think, unfortunately, we've allowed this item to be hideously blurred in terms of what we're actually talking about. 90% of the debate has been about whether we want these things, and if we do, where they should go. Whereas the only thing I can see before us this evening is if we have any, regardless of where they are, who should actually get the contract to build them. So if the answer is ultimately none, it doesn't matter. If the answer is yes, we'd like them, but we'd like them somewhere else or done differently, then again, it doesn't matter. We can make a decision on what's before us this evening. I have to say, though, it does sound from what I have heard I knew nothing about this until it appeared on the item on the agenda for this evening. So I don't know how we've got to this position, but my goodness, it does sound to me as if there's a considerable piece of work that needs to be done. But none of that stops us awarding this contract. So let's concentrate on just the item before us this evening. That's not to say there isn't something else to be said. There most certainly is, but not now, not on this item. This is just about awarding a contract. So I'm against the amendment. I'm in favour of the substantive. Let's get on with it.
Councillor Manders.
Chair, the officers and Councillor Hayes have said exactly what I would say. Thank you.
Councillor Aldridge, are you also conferring with you?
Well, there we go. I mean, I was going to go off on one about low socioeconomic. That's what we're all about. You know, girls in sport. I was going to talk about community sessions which are free to around £10. I mean, my day-to-day job is getting involved in stuff with London Youth Games and sport generally. And but I'm going to, yeah, Roger's absolutely right. This is about what the amendment, what the Play Zone project contract award is about. So thank you, Roger, for confirming that to me.
Off you go.
Sorry. Councillor Morrissey mentioned at the beginning that he feels that there should be some further engagement, particularly Manor Park, but I think we've heard this evening with Beverley Park as well. What is the scope for us to be able to do some of that further engagement? Would that further engagement is there the scope for us to substantively change or alter the plans by doing the further engagement, or is it engagement to tell people about the plan? Do you see what I mean?
Thank you. I mean, there are live planning applications, as you're aware, so there's a planning consultation. I think the fundamentals, as I've said, around the chosen sites and the basics of the design, given their sort of a national scheme, are probably unlikely to be able to be altered, but that, again, that's through the planning process. We certainly can provide additional Q&A or information events over the summer to raise awareness and point people towards the planning process. There's further engagement and consultation we can have on the exact use and type of sports, as I've said, at those facilities as well. There's scope to change things like the line markings or, add, I think, for example, at Manor Park, there's a suggestion that they would like netball as well as basketball. Things like that can be considered. They're not hard-nosed. So I think there's still plenty of discussion to be had, but in terms of, a new engagement leading to completely different proposals, I think that would be a different conversation with the funder.
Okay. Councillor Aldridge.
I thought we were going to leave it where Roger was. I thought we were going to underline it and just vote. But so therefore, I am going to say something. James Giles's comment: if residents believe there are problems with the proposed location, floodlighting, biodiversity, impacts, drainage on other site-specific matters, and the planning process is precisely where those issues should be raised. That is the process that can lead to mitigation measures. I disagree with you. Planning conditions, design changes, or ultimately refusal if the planning authority considers the impact unacceptable. What you're asking is consultation asks people what they think, which is quite right, but the planning requires decision makers to consider material planning concerns and respond to them. That's the difference.
Can I just start? Would you like to wind up on your amendment and then to sum up so we can take it to a vote? Thank you.
I think so, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, I completely agree with you, Councillor Waldridge, on one point. which is that the planning application process only looks at material planning considerations. Moving it 30 metres, as suggested by another councillor this evening for one
Are
of the
you
sites.
winding this up?
Yes, I am winding up, thank you. I'm responding to the debate that's been had on the amendment. Moving something 30 metres is not something that is within the gift of any planning committee. And I'm afraid what I've heard this evening is all still very much tinkering around the edges. Maybe we could add netball, maybe we could do basketball. There are fundamental issues with these play zones. The way it's been gone about has upset and put the backs up of an awful lot of people. I think a lot of reflection needs to be done. But I'm not this evening in a position myself, without having done that additional consultation, to be able to be confident in awarding this contract for these things to be built. And so my own preference remains that we defer this so we can do, alongside the formal process, which is statutory, some optional consultation, which is just good practice to involve people in our decision making. Thank you, Chair.
Do I need some words for an amendment?
It's just now, if no other members would like to speak on the amendment, we should vote on the amendment. Oh, sorry.
I'm going to say something now, because I can wait until after the next one if you want, but I'm going to say it anyway. From what I've heard the officers say, and I think it was at least 2 or 3 other people have asked very similar questions to I did, what I'm hearing is that officer-wise, we're going to struggle to do it in time. I struggle to see that, but if that's what we've been told by officers, and that there is some wiggle room, we believe, where there might be some changes later. So I suppose I'm going to have to go with the officers if that's what they're telling us. But I'm very uneasy about it, and yet again, it's poor consultation. Thank you.
Yes, let's take the amendment.
Can we take a vote to the amendment, please?
Those in favour of the amendment?
Those in favour of the amendment?
Okay, it's clear.
And those against the amendment?
How about you, Chair?
I know. Because the mayor doesn't usually vote. I'm not the mayor. I know I'm not the mayor.
Okay.
And those abstaining?
Thank you. So it is 1 in favour, 11 against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, that has fallen with 1 for, 11 against, and 1 abstention. Thank you very much. So it was defeated. Are we ready to take the substantive to a vote now? Yes? All those in favour, can you please raise your hands?
So is the substantive. Sorry. George, thank you.
Those against?
Councillor Giles.
And no abstentions.
Yeah, so this is 12 in favour, 1 against.
So 12 in favour and 1 against. Thank you very much for all your time on that item.